Welcome to Cooking by the Books, the DBRL culinary program. My name is Stellan Harris. I'll be the one on screen for you, aided by the lovely Jason Delpire, who writes cookbook highlights for the library adult blog. Check those out. High quality stuff. As I've said, Cooking by the Books, the DBRL culinary program. During this, we're going to provide you with some recipes, do some live demos to help you guys maybe try some recipes you wouldn't. In the future, we'll be doing all kinds of stuff. It won't always be candy. I know candy is very popular, but we'll be doing other things, sometimes sort of budget conscious meals or desserts, entrees, some fancier stuff maybe in the future. Who knows at this point? We'll see where we go. But today, we're going to focus on making some delicious candies. It is the candy season. It's not Easter, but Valentine's Day, known for its delicious chocolates and such. So we're going to go through and make some caramels, cover them in chocolate, show you how to make some fancy looking chocolates of your own and see how all that goes. But the question does beg, why would you make chocolates at home? Chocolates are cheap. They're relatively inexpensive. Even the fancier ones are pretty inexpensive. You could go down to some place and buy them. But there are a couple of reasons to make your own chocolates. One of the bigger ones I find is that not every kind of chocolate I want has always the best quality chocolate. But if you make your own chocolate and you can fill it with whatever you want, you can get the high quality stuff that maybe you have allergies, or if you just don't like certain kinds of chocolates, maybe you want a Snickers that is in dark chocolate and don't want to deal with that whole rigmarole. You can make your own. You can do that for yourself, and then you don't have to worry about any of that. And like I said, you can create your own custom combinations. I've seen a lot of recipes for all kinds of candies. I've seen PB&J candies. I've seen candies with all kinds of nougats and honeycombs. It's a whole world of candy out there. And when you make your own candy, you can open the keys to that kingdom. You can be your own master. And personally, I think you can get a better product making your own for lower costs, because you can get really good chocolates, but they are going to be kind of expensive once you get into the higher quality stuff. But if you make your own, then you don't have to worry about all the overheads of paying chocolatiers, because you can be the chocolatier. And if you make your own candy, they make amazing gifts. I have never given someone candy and had them be like, oh, just homemade chocolates. Oh, you shouldn't have. No, people are always psyched. People love getting homemade gifts, especially things like chocolates, because it's a kind of a wow factor for people. And lastly, but I think most importantly, making your own candy is a lot easier than you would expect. I know there's a lot of intimidation about working with chocolates or making caramels. It seems very hot sugar is a potentially dangerous thing, but as long as you're safe and as long as you're conscious, it's not as big as all that. But one of the most important things about working with chocolate is called tempering chocolate. For those of you who don't do a lot of chocolate making, tempering chocolate is basically when we melt chocolate. Chocolate is a web or a crystalline structure of cocoa fats. When we melt chocolate, that structure is sort of broken. And there are certain kinds of structure we want that give chocolate a very shiny appearance, a very sort of pleasant snap as you bite into it that we want. But if you just melt and cool chocolate, you won't get that. You'll get kind of a dull colored chocolate that melts very easily at room temperature. It has a sort of spotty, unpleasant appearance. Sometimes you can get sugar blooms, which is if you're eating chocolate with kind of a white kind of effect over the top of it. That's chocolate that was heated too much and kind of had some sugar bloom. Not as pretty, not the kind of thing you want to give as a gift. But if you heat and cool your chocolate to very specific temperatures, you can either maintain that good structure you want, or you can reestablish it after it's gone. And we can show you how to do that, giving that chocolate a texture that is very pleasing to eat, that snaps as well and has that pretty shiny appearance. But traditional methods require a double boiler, which is a pot of water and then a vessel, usually a glass or a bowl on top. Requires a lot of stirring, a lot of very careful attention, and then you've got a pot of hot water, and that is a lot of work. I've done that in the past, and I've found a method using Chef Mike, that can help us get that same product without having to go through all that rigmarole. All you need is a microwave-safe bowl, a microwave, and a digital thermometer. The thermometer is going to be key throughout all of this because a lot of this is temperature control. And as I mentioned, this is a good example of the untempered versus tempered chocolate. That chocolate over here with that shiny, beautiful appearance. The other chocolate is delicious looking, of course. I would not kick it out of bed, but it doesn't have that sort of shiny, photogenic appearance. It won't snap as much when you bite into that. And we want that good shiny chocolate. So starting with the caramels we're going to make today. Caramel and toffee is mainly, as I mentioned, an exercise in temperature control. The recipe really only asks for one specialty ingredient, that being corn syrup. The rest of it is pretty straightforward and stuff you might already have. And even corn syrup is very inexpensive. You can get it. I get mine at the Aldi. It's very inexpensive. It's something you might not have in your pantry, but something you can get a big bottle of and it'll keep forever. And you can have it there if you want to make caramels or pecan pie or any of that good stuff, and it'll last forever. Most of the time we make this caramel, it's going to be waiting for that stuff to come up to temperature. Caramels need attention, but they don't need a lot of active effort for the most part. What you'll stir it occasionally and you'll watch it to make sure it doesn't get too hot, because it can burn, it can scorch, it can get too hot for the texture we want, but it's not going to be a lot of vigorous stirring. It's not like whipping cream. It's not that super heavy, sort of labor-intensive stuff. One side note is that I mentioned hot sugar. Hot sugar is potentially dangerous, and you want to treat it with a lot of respect, because when sugar is hot and it gets on you, it'll burn you and it doesn't want to come off. And that can lead to some pretty nasty burns. So if you're doing this at home, you want to be careful that you make sure that you're giving the sugar the attention it deserves, making sure that you're not doing anything dangerous with it. Now, that's the chocolate. Oh no, I reordered things. That's okay. We'll come back to the chocolate. Let's give you some ingredients first. So, as I mentioned, this is all the equipment that you're going to need. You'll need the microwave, a stovetop burner, medium saucepan. Mine's 3 quarts. This is, I think, a really great size for this, at least for this quantity that we're doing. You want a saucepan that's got high walls to it, because this stuff is going to increase in height, and you don't want this to boil over, because that is it's a key recipe for getting hot sugar all over your kitchen, for getting potential burns, and we're not about that. You'll need a spatula. This is a silicone spatula. You will also need a kitchen scale. I recommend using a kitchen scale for pretty much everything in the kitchen. It helps you get a level of exactness that I think helps a lot, especially in something like this, where the ratios of ingredients do matter quite a bit. The other thing that I think is pretty non-negotiable is temperature. It's a digital thermometer. This is mine. It's a probe thermometer. You don't need one with a fancy cord like this. Any kind of instant read thermometer will work very well. You'll need a knife and cutting board for cutting up your chocolate, parchment paper, nonstick spray for lining our pans. And then if you want to make molded chocolates, you will need a silicone mold. That is entirely optional. You can just dip your lovely caramels in chocolate and you'll be good to go. These are ingredients for our chocolate covered caramels. I put mixed insert number because that will be largely up to you. The size at which you cut your caramels will really determine the yield you get, but it won't be a small amount of caramels. You'll get a pretty good number, and this recipe is great for making it for other people, making guests, because I did this a couple test runs, and I have a lot of caramels that I am not going to be able to eat in a healthy manner. So a lot of my friends are going to get caramels pretty soon. But the ingredients themselves will need 230 grams of unsalted butter, melted, and heavy cream. We'll need 60 grams of water, 155 grams of corn. I use light corn syrup. Then after light corn syrup, it'll just change the color of your caramel. 400 grams of granulated sugar, kosher salt to taste, because salted caramel is great, and a little bit for decoration. You'll need some vanilla, again for taste. I put a teaspoon there. That's my recommendation. But if you want some super vanilla caramels, you could do more, but I leave that in your hands. And then 12 ounces of dark chocolate. It doesn't have to be dark chocolate. You could use milk. I wouldn't use white for this because it changes some temperature stuff. Even the milk will be at different temperature. Even the milk chocolate will be at different temperatures. But white is a particularly tricky beast, so I wouldn't do that for your first outing. There, like duplicated a slide. That's fine. Now, for our chocolates, this is the easy way of tempering chocolate. I say it's the easy way because it only requires this guy and a thermometer And there's a slightly harder way that I'll also cover, but this is the easiest way, is you will take your chocolate, cut it up into as fine pieces as you can. You want to get it pretty small so that it melts easily and evenly. And then placing your chocolate in the microwave at half power for 30 seconds, taking out, testing it, mixing it around, do that again. And eventually you'll start to see the chocolate turn a bit dull. That's when it's beginning to melt. You want to be very careful at that stage. Start going in 15 seconds and 5-second bursts. You want to just melt. Oh, Jason, we have a question?
Yeah, we do have a question of,
Please.
will you be able to give us equivalent measurements and cups, or do we look it up?
Ooh, that's a good question. I did look this up previously, I believe. So for cups, I know that the butter is about 2 sticks, so about a cup. The heavy cream should be a similar amount, but I would recommend you weigh it. There isn't always a clean measurement in cups. Like the water, I think comes at like 4 tablespoons. The corn syrup, I'm not even sure. The sugar is about 2 cups, but I would recommend folks either look up the conversions or get a kitchen scale. Again, I'll send the praises of kitchen scale, but these aren't crazy conversions. You could very easily find a way to look that up online. But I would say, again, the kitchen scale is going to be the best way to do this in terms of accuracy.
Do we have a simple ratio that you could maybe express?
Ooh, that's a good question. I would say, I hadn't thought of a ratio. That's interesting. I would say, I would go with 2 cups of sugar. I would go with a cup each of butter and cream. Do 4 tablespoons of water, and then for the light corn syrup, might want to go 2/3 of a cup. But even that's sort of imperfect. That's what I'll go. I think I'll go with that as recommendations. It's not perfect, but it's going to get you about what you're looking for.
Caramel's fixable.
Yeah, caramel is, like, say, it's not caramel is the kind of thing where you always need hard numbers. It is kind of open to a little bit of wiggle room. I gave these measurements in weights just because I figured it'd be the easiest way to do it. But if folks don't have kitchen scales, you can find conversions pretty easily. And I don't want to give a hard ratio because I don't want to give incorrect information. I want to give, to the best of my knowledge, I don't have a ratio prepared, but I know there are tools online that can get you those conversions. I would recommend using those. Any more questions? Beautiful. All right. But back to our easy method of chocolate. So as I was saying, you want to get it in there, I'd say 2 or 3 30 seconds until it starts to turn dull. Then you want to go in 15, even 5 until it just starts to melt. And that's when you want to start temping it. You want to get your thermometer and you want to try and get it to between 84 degrees and 91 Fahrenheit. You don't want to take it above 95 with this method. Because if you take it to just this temperature range, the chocolate will start to melt, but that crystalline structure we talked about won't get disrupted. So it'll still be in temper, but it'll also be meltable and you can dip things in it and it's very easy to work with. And that's the one I'm going to use today. One thing I will note, you don't want to get any water in the chocolate because getting water during this will cause it to seize, and that's really bad. There are ways to fix it, but it's not something you want to mess around with. If at all possible, you want to keep water out of your chocolate. Now, if you do get it too hot, that is very fixable. Say the water in chocolate is a little bit less flexible, but it's still flexible. But getting it too hot is not the end of the world. So if you do get it too hot, what you want to do is you want to take a half and again amount that chocolate. Sorry, you want to take a half amount of chocolate, chop it up, and get it to around 100 degrees. The chocolate that you already microwaved. Then you want to slowly add that extra chocolate in, mixing it around, making sure that it gets back down to that 91, 84. Then you will still have in-tempered chocolate, but it'll be chocolate that got a little bit too hot, but you were able to reestablish that crystalline structure that you want in the first place. Do we have questions of ingredients, Jason? Okay. Beautiful. All right. So that's my big spiel. That's essentially what we'll be doing today. So I will get out of my share screen mode so we can get back in the action. Beautiful. Hello again. So as mentioned, I'm going to get my burner on. I'm going to put in my sugar, 400 grams of sugar. is my cornstarch, my cornstarch, my corn syrup. Cornstarch is something very different. Get it all in there. Using the spatula to make sure, because corn syrup and most syrups don't like to come out of containers. I've seen some sort of fancy, almost like syringe type contraptions that you can buy to help like measure like honey and syrups and stuff like that. I don't have those, so I'm just using plain old spatula. And then we go in with our water. Beautiful. I'm going to give that a preliminary mix. Not going to do too terribly much with it. Just make sure everything gets nice and moistened. Everything's mixed around nicely. Beautiful. Starting to come up to temperature, starting to get a little warm, which is what we want. Leave that alone for a little bit. We can talk about the other part of our caramel. So this is the butter and the heavy cream. So what you're going to do as you get that ready is you want to mix these together, sort of divvy these up. It doesn't need to be totally homogeneous. Just make sure that they're getting mixed up. So yes, especially if you're working quickly and you just melt butter, it might curdle, it might not curdle, it might solidify a little bit in the cream. That's fine. Doesn't need to be fully melted. Totally cool. So this is starting to come up to temperature. We're getting a little bit of some bubbles. It's gonna bubble. Just to give you a heads up. It is sugar, and it's going to bubble a lot. It'll bubble a lot more when we add these two here, but it's going to bubble a little bit actually. How are we doing? How are we doing in chat, Jason?
We're clear right now.
Beautiful, Jason. You've got a bit of experience making caramels, don't you?
Yes.
I've made caramels a little bit before, but I've made a few this recipe specifically for gifts, but I haven't made a lot of other caramels. So this was a bit of a learning experience for everyone, but I'm happy to share that with you folks. But Jason has done a bit more caramel stuff.
The only difference that I see so far is I've used my butter at the end to help cool down the caramel.
Yes.
So.
Yeah. Jason had the butter a little bit later, but we're also going to kind of do that. We're just going to bring it up to temp a bit first, and then bring it back up. So caramels themselves do vary a little bit in terms of temperature, but it's mostly based on what you want in terms of texture. Because the higher you go, the firmer the caramel gets. I believe, oh goodness, I used to know all the temperature cutoffs, but there are different stages: soft crack, hard crack, all that kind of stuff when you make candies. But that's not really germane to today. But I'm sure Jason knows them.
Well, it kind of is. I mean, because you want to get it well beyond the hard crack stage.
You do, yes. So the temperature rating it to at this first stage is 320 degrees, which is, as Jason said, beyond hard crack. And then we're going to bring it back down and then bring it up a little bit more so it gets that nice chew that you want out of a candy. And we're mixing around. It's fully liquid now. I've got all my sugars melted. The corn syrup has helped make that a little bit easier of a process. There are certain recipes that you make this without the syrup. And the reason I add the syrup is something called crystallization. Because if you don't use the syrup, then when the sugar gets cooked, it wants to become crystals again. And the classical way that you avoid this is you get a little bowl of water and a pastry brush or any kind of kitchen brush, and you kind of wet the sides so that you don't build up crystals. Because if you do build up crystals, then it makes your caramel kind of grainy and not as tasty. But with that syrup in there, the sugar doesn't want to crystallize as much. And so it helps make our lives a little bit easier. What I'm going to do is I'm aware that sugar's not done yet, but I'm going to temp it, see where we are. It's starting to bubble away. We're getting up there. Hitting 185, almost 2. About 200 degrees right now. So not something you want to spill, not something you want to put your arm in if you can avoid it.
What level do you have the burner on? Is it
So
medium high?
I would, at home, I would say go medium high. I'm high on this one because this is a smaller burner. It's not as powerful. So I need like the most this can give me to hit that 320. But at home, I would do medium high. Feel around, every oven will be different, but I think medium high is a good place to start. If you do this at home and you notice it's not going fast, or it might stall at certain places, you can raise it up slowly until you get that temperature that you want. Just giving this another stir, and then I'm probably gonna leave this alone for a little while. Because again, after a certain point, I don't want to disturb it. I don't want a lot of air in this.
Is this water, sugar, corn syrup?
Yes, this is water, sugar, and corn syrup. All it is right now. I've got my cream and my butter over here, but those aren't going to go in until we're a little bit hot. But yeah, that is kind of the beauty of making caramels, is they're pretty simple overall. Like most of this is water, sugar, corn syrup, butter, and cream. That's it. And of course, a bit of salt, a bit of vanilla, but that's extra flavors. You don't need those. I think they taste pretty good, but you don't need them particularly. We're getting up to about two. It's starting to boil in earnest now, which is pretty good. So at this point, I'm not going to touch it too much more. I just want to let that get up to temperature. It's going to boil and froth up a little bit. And we're going to wait for that to happen before we do. What I will do, just because I'm thinking about it now, is I'm going to add my vanilla to my cream and butter mixture now. I'm going to do about a capful, which would be about a teaspoon, because I think it adds a nice little flavor. Doesn't got to be fancy vanilla. Vanilla extract works just fine. Yeah.
You said about 4 tablespoons of water is what you use?
Yeah, just about. I did that conversion. About 4 tablespoons of water. So I'm very happy folks are interested in doing this as well. I will have the ingredients list posted next time. I will do those conversions for you. But I appreciate all the interest you folks have shown in this. It is bubbling away. Make sure we're keeping up with the temp. But it is, yeah, we're at about 240 right now, so I'm gonna let this just keep bubbling away. Make sure everything's ready for when we do need to move a little quickly. What you can do at home at this point while this is going is you can prepare your vessels that you'll put the caramel in. So I will go off camera real quick to grab mine. I'm just using some square pans. What you want to do is you want to spray this part with some nonstick spray, or just oil in general, and then get some parchment paper. You want more parchment paper than you'll need to cover the bottom of this. You press that in there, fold it around. You can make sure it's got some overhang. If it's overhang, is what you're going to use to lift the caramel out at the end, after everything's done. So I would recommend you can do this now. Say this won't need a lot of babysitting for a while. It's just going to come up to temp. It's going to bubble away. Make sure nothing is bubbling too much. But in a pot this has this amount of ingredients, that shouldn't be a big issue. While I'm prepping my ingredients, I'll get a bit of salt here too. Does everyone love salted caramel? I've yet to meet. I'm sure not everyone does, but I do. Jason, thoughts on salted caramel?
I'm sorry?
Thoughts on salted caramel?
Oh, it's a necessity.
Yeah, it's a necessity. Wow. Jason, big fan of the salted caramel. I can't argue with him. He's got a good point. It's like 250 now, 250, 250, 255. So it is slowly coming up to temperature. As I said, this is going to be the majority of the cook time, is waiting for this to come up to temperature, making sure that you're getting those caramels, you're getting those sugars caramelized. Conflating my words here. Those sugars nice and caramelized and mixed together, making that sugar structure that we want for that delicious caramel pull. I'm gonna give this one final stir, and then I'll probably just leave it. I know I said the last one was the final stir, but I wanted to get some. Make sure everything's heating evenly, and it looks like it is. It should be good. Beautiful. Yes, I was just like it was a question, so I looked over at him expectantly. You see other tips about this. One thing I will bring up about the caramels, since we have some time here, is talking about cutting the size and the yield. So I'm using just a small square pan. I have two of these, depending on how tall I want these caramels. Better over prepared than under prepared. And after they cool, the size you cut them in is largely up to you. I know some folks who bust out the ruler and go very exact, scoring everything. It's very professional looking. I've done that maybe once, but I find that folks kind of appreciate the homemade look that you get with some candies of that kind that are a little bit irregular, but still taste good.
Can you repeat the temperature you're going?
Sure. The temperature we're aiming for is 320 degrees. So yeah, it's pretty high. It seems kind of high, but that's what we need to get our sugar cooked past that hard crack stage. No, I'm not going to stir it. I want to stir it. I'm fighting my instincts to not stir the pot, but we're just leaving it. We're keeping that temperature in. See, this thermometer is great because I can just leave that probe in, so to make sure it's not resting against the bottom of the pot too much, because I don't want to get a pot reading and a sugar reading. But making sure everything's good. See, as it cooks, it'll get it a bit more viscous, and it'll kind of support your probe a little bit more. But
can you explain why we're not stirring it?
Yes, we're not stirring it because if we stir it too much, there's going to be air into it, and we don't want to aerate this really at all, because that's going to introduce air bubbles, which is going to mess with your final texture. You really just want to leave this and let this cook. It'll be fine. It's unlike, it's not going to stick to your pot. As long as we're cooking, as long as we're moving fast and we're doing all this stuff, it'll be fine. I just don't want to introduce any more air into this, because then it might end up with some holes in your final product. But that's a good question. We just hit 300 degrees, so we're almost done with this portion. And then we get to move a little bit faster and do a little bit more stuff. Do the part where it's going to spit at me a lot and be really upset that I'm adding things to it. Hot sugar doesn't like when you add stuff to it. It gets very upset with you. But we're being safe. We're being very careful, and so we'll add it very slowly, add it very, very carefully, so we don't get a big flare up and things don't end up poorly. But I hear you, Birthman Jack, who wants to stir the pot, because I'm very much in that I don't like to leave things alone sometimes. But in this case specifically, we want to make sure it's good.
That was my question.
Oh, it's Jason's question? Oh, Jason.
Just to clarify, full information.
Of course, yeah. No, it's a good question.
Because my method is dry.
Yes, it is. We have different methods of caramel making, and so it's good to share that experience, sharing the cooking wisdom. We're almost there. We're at 3:15. Nope. We're getting real close. It has changed color. It's gone from a kind of off-white. Now it's getting kind of golden. There we go. That is our sign that we need to start moving. Now, I'm going to, once again, take my butter and cream mixture, make sure it's all divvied up nicely. I'm gonna grab my spatula. Now, we're gonna add this, we're gonna stir it. Don't add it all at once, we're gonna add it in stages. Once you add it, it's gonna spit and it's going to bubble, it's gonna steam. Watch out for steam burns. Steam burns are nothing to mess with, folks. Yep, see, there's that steam. There's a reason I moved my hand out of the way before I did that. I've been steam burned, it is not fun. But luckily, it's only going to really steam and spit at you that first time. After that, you start stirring all that good butter and sugar and vanilla and salt in there. Oh, it smells great. Vanilla is really coming through. That cooked sugar, beautiful. All right. So, still with that same heat, I'm gonna stir this, really make sure everything's getting on there. Going with my spatula, it's my cream butter. Just get all that good stuff out there best we can. Beautiful. Now this one we can stir a little bit because This one's got some more stuff in it. So as I mentioned before, at this point, we're trying to hit a temperature of 240 degrees, which is 240 to 245. It's okay if it goes a little bit over. That's going to give us a nice chew to our caramel. So your temperature is going to have dropped a little bit from adding that either cold or room temperature butter and cream. And so you want to stir this a little bit because, as I mentioned before, it's gonna flare up a little bit. It's got a bit more stuff to play around with in the pot, and so you're going to get a bit more of a froth, a bit more of some bubbles in there as those sugar structures begin to form together. But keep stirring it, keep an eye out, make sure it doesn't boil over, as I mentioned before, because that's very dangerous. But even this, I'm just moving it around, making sure we don't get any spillovers. It's starting to thicken considerably. Again, smells like wonderful, delicious caramel. It's still relatively light in color. That's mostly because we didn't take that sugar too far. If we're making something like toffee, we might have taken it a bit further, but it's starting to get that beautiful golden brown color. I've seen recipes for caramels where they use brown sugar instead. I'm sure those recipes are fine. Oh, glasses fell off. Well, I don't need my glasses to cook. No, I should wear my glasses. If you're looking down all the time. But yeah, if you find a recipe online that uses brown sugar, just pay attention to what that recipe calls for in terms of any differences in ratios or measurements. That will give you a sort of darker, more molassesy caramel, which isn't bad. I like brown sugar. But again, it's at this point where it's bubbling away. It's starting to get nice and sticky. I want to keep stirring, keep temperature probing. At this point, both in my dry run and previous, it can sometimes stall in that temperature window. Like right now, it's sitting at 225. It might hover at a temperature for a while. Just keep going, keep heating it. It'll eventually heat up to 10.
If you're going to use brown sugar, you're going to have to worry about, you have to use a thermometer. You can't use it visually.
Yeah.
The color change already.
Yes, that's a good point. Jason brought up. With brown sugar, you don't get as much visual indication. So you really want to use that temperature. You want to use the thermometer anyway, but it's especially important if you're using a brown sugar. I imagine you could use a recipe like this and add molasses, but it's going to be different amounts of liquid, and it's not something you want to just add not thinking about it, because this is such a precarious sort of mixture.
Brown sugar will change the liquid content also.
Exactly, yeah. So like I said, if you find a recipe that uses brown sugar, it'll be a bit different than this, I would imagine. So it's not a direct one-to-one sub. Oh, we're starting to creep back up a temperature. 230. We're almost there, people. Beautiful. And like I said, your time might be different than this. Your oven might be a bit more powerful than this one is. I'm just using a little single burner here, but really just keep an eye on things. Tempt things liberally. Really watch that temperature to make sure you're not going over that 240. That 240 really is, 245 is your upper limit for this kind of caramel. But if you go too much higher, it's going to really change the final product. Right. Nice. So I mentioned before it was really spitting at me, but now that it's gotten up to almost temperature, it stopped spitting at me near as much. It's still bubbling, but because we used a pretty good sized saucepan, it's not in danger of overflowing, which is important, because as we covered, sugar burns suck. Beautiful.
So the question was, do we lower the stovetop temperature when adding your butter and cream?
Nope. You don't. I've not touched that dial since we started. So the reason you wouldn't change that temperature is because you want to you're gonna have to bring it back up to temperature anyway. And adding that to a lower heat is gonna prolong that point at which it's at that stage, kind of in between not hitting our good 240, but also not super hot anymore. So I would just keep that temperature the same. We'll just show you folks. We're getting there. Make sure. Sometimes this burner is still new, so I'm still getting used to how it works, but we're getting there slowly but surely. And also, while you're waiting for this, clean up your area. Always make sure that you're cleaning up as you go, because there's nothing worse. This is time for my soapbox. You don't want to do anything to have a bunch of dishes. You want to move your stuff out of your area. You want to make sure that your area is not cluttered. I don't need a lot of these containers anymore. I want to move them. I will. Isn't that so nice? I've still got one to hold my spatula, but beyond that, we've cleaned up a little bit, got a bit less clutter. Now let's zoom. Keep that salt. I want that salt later. Whoa. I think we've hit it. 240. Make sure. Moving around a little bit. I think we hit it.
Can you describe the aroma you're getting?
Oh, I certainly can. So this is it's very vanilla forward at first, but once it's hit this point, it starts to smell, for lack of a word, like caramel. It's got that sort of deep kind of toasty smell to it. It's very sweet, but it's also got kind of a complexity to it. Yeah, it smells like caramel. Smells great. All right. Yep. We've hit our register. It looks like. Give it a second. Make sure it comes up the temp properly. You will get occasion in which you might be against like the bottom of the pot or the side that you want to really make sure that your temp's right. But you win it around the 238. Oh, we're painfully close. Yep, there it is. All right. So, word to the wise. After this, you want to submerge this in water because hot sugar, that's going to harden. But we've hit our 240 mark, so I'm going to go in with my pan here. This is, again, parchment paper that's been greased. And just straight off, going right in. Beautiful. Fast. I'll do the whole batch in one. We're going to get some nice thick caramels later. But beautiful. All right. So now we can turn our burner off. And I'm going to go put this in the sink because with caramel, you want to wash your pots immediately. Otherwise, that sugar will harden and you'll never get it off. So please excuse me. Beautiful. All right, folks.
If you do forget to clean your pan immediately, you can actually put the water into the pan, put it back on the burner.
And that's a good tip. Jason was saying, if you do happen to forget or you get caught up in things and you forget you've got a pot with some cooked sugar product on it, like caramel, if you fill that pan full of water and boil it again, you can get that sugar off of there. But otherwise, it's a real pain to clean. But as you folks will be able to see, this is our hot caramel. I did the one pan just enough to make some nice thick caramels. And the thing you want to do now is you want to let this sit at room temperature for about 6 hours. And that'll help it sort of firm up. It'll lose some of that heat. And I'm just going to move this guy over here because it's some movie magic. We have some pre-made caramels. I know you guys from the library for some movie magic. Right here. And then you. Like this, just some nice pieces of caramel. Now we get to do the fun part with our chocolate. So, as we mentioned before, we want to get our thermometer, which actually I'm gonna give a quick rinse because I want to get that sugar off. We don't want that giving us a false reading on our thermometer. Perfect. All right. We want to again make sure this is dry because we don't want what in chocolate, Jason?
No water.
No water in the chocolate. Beautiful. All right. So this is our chopped up chocolate. I chopped this beforehand. This is our microwave. Let's get the temperature chocolate. This guy's already been set. Get a little power. So I'm going to go in for that first 30 seconds. Where'd you go? I hope there's not too much microwave background noise. It should be filtering this out, but apologies if there is. It shouldn't. There shouldn't be.
Do you have a description of what the consistency of your sugar mixture was when you put it into the pan?
When I put it into the pan, like look right at the start.
When you put it into the pan
Oh,
after it was uncooking.
The pan after the pan that I'm trying to clean right now. That pan? Or the pan I prepared?
Pan, your parchment and aluminum foil pan.
So it is going to be very liquidy. It's going to be kind of thick. The best comparison I have is like a caramel sauce. It's going to be, which feels a bit weird, but it's basically what it is at this point. It's a caramel sauce without some of the extra stuff that would make it stay saucy. But I would compare it to a nice melted caramel that you might have at like an ice cream shop. So that's 30 seconds. Let's check. No, nothing yet. It's starting to get a bit dull, but we've got no melting yet. We're going to go back in another 30 seconds. I'll stick around this side. I forgot it's going to ding at us. I don't want it to ding on the recording. Boop, boop. Keep my motor probe at the ready. Want to get this right when it's starting to melt. Let's check it. Lost the motor probe there. It's starting to get a little thick. I've got some guys that are melting. So we've got some guys that are starting to stick together. This is when you want to start going slow. I'm not going to attempt this quite yet, but I'm going to put it in for another 15 seconds and we're going to see. This is the part I was waiting for. It's gotten a very dull color to it. Keeps falling. It's gotten a very kind of dull color to it. It's just starting to melt. And so now we're going to be real careful with it. 15 seconds. We want it to just melt.
And what happens if I heat my chocolate too much?
If you heat your chocolate too much, what you want to do is you want to take half the weight of what you did, chop it up real fine, and you want to get this up to about 100 degrees. So it gets nice and melty. You want to slowly mix in that chocolate, that new chocolate, and that'll reestablish that beautiful crystalline structure we talked about. And see, even that, like we're starting to get nice and melty. Not quite there yet, but everything's sticking together. We're getting nice chocolate smears. It's just starting to melt. We'll go another 15 seconds. This is at the critical point. Oh, we're making pretty good time, folks. Let's give it a nice stir. Ooh, yeah, let's tempt this. So, like I said, it was still holding its form, but we're starting to melt now as I stir it. This is where you want to get them at that temperature. We're going to mix as much as you can. In fact, this is a job for our big spatula now. Actually, 4 will do fine. As I said that, I'm like, it's still got some schmutz on it. I don't want to cross-contaminate. We'll do just fine. Okay. So this still has some lumps. Not all that chocolate is melted, but we want to temp it now. Let's see. Ooh. Is that, ooh. So this is at 82 degrees. Oh, 84. Okay. No, this is looking pretty good. So I'm gonna give this one other mix. Let me see if I can get all this solid chocolate nice and melted. I might go another 5 seconds in the microwave, but I don't want to lose that temper. I want to make sure that this is workable, it's nice and melted, but not too hot. Because again, don't want to lose that temper. Yeah, all this stuff is, it's all, as I mix it, it's melting nicely. It's still a little thick, but we are on the doorstep, people. Almost there to beautiful homemade chocolates. Yeah, I'm gonna go 5 seconds in the microwave. We are practically there. I'm just at 5 second bursts. Do it, mix, then temp. Yeah, see, even at 5 seconds, it's become super workable. It's no longer real thick. It's gotten shiny again. I'm gonna temp this. Let's see how we're doing. $86. Any hotter chocolate? No, still 86. I might. Oh, let's be daring. So we still got a couple chunks in there. So this will probably be the last time I microwave it. Let's make sure we're not getting too hot. No, we're still 86. I'm gonna go another 5 seconds in there, and then I'm gonna pull it. That'll be our melted chocolate. Again, you want to make sure that you're not getting much chocolate on the thermometer probe, so that can give you false positives. It can be reading the temperature of that chocolate it's encased in, not the chocolate that you're dipping it in. Yeah, 5 seconds more, and that'll be it. Yep, that's it. That's our tempered chocolate. It's beautiful, it's smooth, and it's still in temper. So we're gonna move fast here. I'm gonna grab one of my beautiful caramels. It's gonna be a nice square one. Dip it in. I'm gonna put it in there. I'm gonna flip it over. Mix it around. We're gonna get it out of our chocolate. Come on, big guy. Didn't want to come. And there we go. And while I've got that spice more, I'm going to hit it with some nice, beautiful salt. Let's do another one. Again, just drop it in. I'm just using a plastic fork. No fancy tools. If you have fondue forks, they work lovely for this. But I didn't have any handy, so just use a fork. Again, beautiful, nice and rustic. Hit it with kosher salt. Beautiful. Now we do a special one. Do a nice mold chocolate. This is a silicone mold, heart shaped, of course, for the holiday. So what I'm gonna do, take some of my chocolate. While it's still nice and warm, nice and in temper. Mix it around a little bit. I'm gonna put a little bit in this mold here. Just a little bit to get a nice base layer of chocolate. Drag it around the mold, make sure it fills nice some nooks and crannies. If you need a little bit more, put a little more in there. It should be nice and liquidy enough for you to still work with it. Then I'm going to take one of my caramels, press it in there. Maybe just a small amount of chocolate on top, smooth it over. And I'm going to leave that. And that's going to harden in about 2 or 3 minutes and be delicious, beautiful chocolates. Let's do one more while we have some chocolate temper. But that is largely the process, folks.
You can also have a warm bowl of water
Yes.
to keep your chocolate temp,
Mm-hmm.
so you can work with it a little bit longer.
Yeah. So a warm bowl of water would be great to keep this in temper. Like even now, as I'm working with it, it's starting to harden back up. It's still in temper, but it's starting to thicken back up, which tells me it's getting a little bit cold again, which means I might pop it in there for like 5 seconds to make sure it stays workable. Beautiful. And that was a little rectangular, a little rustic. Of course, we hit it. Little flaky salt. Beautiful. Right. And folks, we have made ourselves some delicious caramels, some delicious chocolate covered caramels at that. And I think I'm gonna give our nice heart shape a minute or two to re-solidify. You know, something beautiful. But change our minds. Yeah, so like I said, this is already thickening back up. It's becoming hard to work with. So like Jason said, we can pop it back in the microwave for about 5 seconds. We'll keep a nice warm bowl of water, and that will help us out. Also, you're gonna get chocolate into places. It's cost of doing business. So make sure you wash your hands afterwards, and don't touch too many things with chocolate fingers. But I think that is a great place for us to wrap up our program. I want to thank everyone who came out here and who joined us for this chocolate making excursion. I'm very happy that folks are interested in this kind of programming here at DBRL, and that we can provide these programs for you on hopefully a regular basis. Do you have more questions in chat, Jason?
Not currently.
Beautiful. I'll pop over my share screen. Give you that. Last goodbyes. Thank you for joining us. This program will be recorded. So if you know some folks who wanted to make it but couldn't, it should be on our YouTube channel soonish. So hard to get the exact time frame, but keep an eye on our YouTube channel for that. And we hope that you'll join us for our future things. We're going to try and do another one of these next month. And we'll see what we'll be making then. And this time I'll post our ingredients list beforehand. So keep an eye out for that.
Question is, are you planning to do many more of these cook-alongs?
I plan to do a good number of these in the future. I'm aiming to try and do at least a couple more, doing them once a month, just to give folks a chance to have some fun cooking, do it in a more communal setting, have this sort of cozy atmosphere, get questions answered for some stuff. And yeah, I plan to do some more of these. Excellent. Beautiful. All right, folks. As I mentioned, this has been great fun. I'm Selton Harris, has been joined by the lovely Jason Delpire, who's been manning the chat, answering all your questions. And I think we're going to call it there. So thank you all very much, and have a wonderful weekend and a wonderful Valentine's Day. Oh, I almost forgot, Jason. I almost signed out. I almost signed out without our big finale. See if this is ready to come out. Oh, just barely ready. Even now, it's not quite set up. Oh no, I'll risk it. A nice heart-shaped chocolate. Oh, beautiful, beautiful heart-shaped chocolate. All right. Thank you, folks. Have a wonderful weekend and a happy Valentine's Day.